today we are going to be going through what Message Center is. So I wanted to just start out by kind of explaining what our Message Center service is. Essentially, it's an answering service. Our operators are trained to take calls for your company after hours or during the day, however you would like to send those calls over to us. The beauty of us being the answering service for your company is that our monitoring reps are taking those calls. So you have a set of operators who are trained on those, but they're also familiar with the alarm industry. They can have knowledgeable conversations with your customers about their accounts, about the history of the account. If the customer needs to place the account on test, has questions about who is on their contact list, they can do all of that right there with the operator that is taking those calls. So it's different than your traditional answering service where they would just take the message and send the information off to you, and then you would have to follow up with them. A lot of these calls do become a one-call resolution because we are able to answer those questions. Also, we have a way where you will have the visibility and keep control of the schedule and who is actually going to be receiving those service notifications. So as we go through that, we're going to get into that and what that looks like and how you would set those up. But first, I wanted to talk about how these notifications are actually sent over. So let me go ahead and go into the administration tab. If you are a Message Center dealer, you are probably familiar with the notification contacts tab and the notification list tab. But if you're not, this is going to be a really good way for you to see how this works and how it's developed. Now, Jason, over the last couple of weeks, has talked a little bit about the administration tools. That's what these first couple tabs are for. So we're going to skip over those and go directly into the notification contacts. Okay, so right now you'll see that the list is empty. What I'm going to do is set up a notification contact from the beginning and then show you how you would manage the notification list or the schedule. So let's go ahead and click Add Contact. Now you'll see this looks very similar to just adding a contact in Compass. Pretty straightforward. You have your first name, last name tabs, and then you'll see these other fields. So we have Send Message Center text notifications. That's where you would put the phone number. So we would text you the service information. Now, when you receive that text message, there'll be a link where you can click on the link, and that will take you to Compass, and that will show you what the customer had a conversation with the operator about and what service was needed. So you would put in a phone number here. So let's go ahead and start this. So you'll see when I tab over, this blue button turns blue. So that's saying that the SMS notification is enabled. So once that contact is added to the notification list, it can then receive service messages. So it's a little different than your typical SMS message that you would set up for a customer, because that customer has to receive the welcome message and accept those notifications. Because this is a different type of service, you don't have to, or the contacts don't have to accept anything. It just automatically goes to that person. So below that, you have Send Message Center email notifications. So far, we can send an SMS message, we can send an email with the information, and there's also an option to make an IVR phone call. Now, IVR, you may or may not have heard about that before. It's essentially a automated voice system. So what happens is the technician, if enabled, would receive a phone call. Now, that phone call is not going to be from a live person, but it will make the phone ring. There are certain types of phones that you can set up where you can set a specific ringtone to a text message where it rings like a phone call, but some of them don't. I know a lot of the Android phones don't have that option to set it up for specific contacts, but you can do that You can set up this where it's enabled to make the IVR phone call, and you can set the ringtone to that particular phone number. So the IVR phone calls do come from our normal 1-800-432-1429 phone number, which is our monitoring center. So it's a phone number that the contacts are already going to be familiar with. Okay, let me go ahead and plug in the phone number there. Now, down here at the bottom, you have service companies. I would say most of the time there's only going to be one service company that you would need to worry about, and that would be yours. But there are a couple dealers that would have more than one dealer number. So if that's the case, you will have to assign this particular contact to each of the individual dealer numbers. So this login has 2 dealers. So I'm going to go ahead and say this contact is good for this dealer, and this contact is good for this dealer. At this point, we can go ahead and save the contact. Now, again, this can be, you can fill in all of these fields for the text message, the email, and the IVR, or you can just fill in one. Maybe this person only wants to receive a text message. They don't need an email or an IVR phone call. Maybe they only want an email. That's okay. You can put all of that in there. I will say, though, that you do have to have at least a phone number in the SMS or the text message notification field and an email if you're going to be using the IVR notification, because we do have to be able to get the link to the service request or the message over to you in some fashion. So let me go ahead and save this. Okay, so now this is showing me that I have a contact available that I can assign to a list. So now we're going to go ahead and get into what these lists are and what that looks like. So let me go ahead and click on Notification List. Now again, because I have multiple service companies, I can choose which service company I want to set my schedule up for. So we're going to start with one, and then I'm going to show you an easy way to get all of that information from the one service company over to the other service company without having to manually go in and enter in that information again. Okay, so now I'm going to select my notification list. So you'll see that there's quite a few different options. And the reason for that is because we have set a standard set of operating procedures, for lack of a better term, for each type of call that we could possibly get from your customer. Now, you might have a different on-call list for, say, fire hood messages than you do for your fire sprinkler technicians, and that's okay. We have a way where we can set all of that up. But having that standard where if it's a phone call stating that they're having an issue with their sprinkler system, that's going to make that phone call with the operator move a lot faster because they already know exactly how to log that message, and Compass will automatically send those messages to the proper people instead of having an operator trying to figure out who needs to get what message. So typically when we get to this point, I tell everyone to go ahead and click on all. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to fill in every single one, but it does list them out for you just in case you do need to adjust this one or that one. Okay, so first we have our standard messages. So we break standard messages down by billing, sales, general messages, and data changes. It's fairly self-explanatory. If you have a customer calling in and they have a question about their bill, we would send them a billing message. If you had a prospective customer calling in, hey, I saw your sign as I was driving down the road and I'm interested in your service, then we would send that as a sales message. Typically, I would say probably 90% of the time, that's going to just be an email address that's plugged in there because we don't want to wake a technician up in the middle of the night to give them a sales message because they're not going to be handling it at that moment in time. That would need to go to the office the next day to reach out to that person calling in. So when you're filling that out, try to keep that in mind. Who should this message go to? Billing should probably go to your billing point person. Sales could go to a sales manager. A general message would be A technician, maybe the technician is calling out for the day and the office isn't open yet. That would be a general message. It's just a general office message. Data changes are just like it says. It's a customer that's interested in updating something on their account. So maybe they need to add a new contact list or change a password, update a schedule, you know, things like that. That's where you would put in an email address for your data changes. So that would be like your office manager maybe. Okay, so then down here for burglary service, now this is where you're going to fill in the schedule for who is going to get notified on service calls. So you'll see that we have 4 tiers of notification. You have first notice, second notice, third notice, and final notice. The reason that we do that is so these, well, it's really to make sure that the person that's getting the message actually gets the message and has a moment to deal with it. So they go out 10 minutes apart. So the first notification will go out. It will wait for 10 minutes for that technician to acknowledge that message. And if no acknowledgement has been had, then it will go to the second notice. You can have the same person listed for all 4. You could have the technician listed for 1, 2, and 3, and then the service manager also listed for the final notice. However you want to set that up internally for your company and what would work best for you. And now to do that, all you would do is click on this down arrow and then choose the person that's going to be on call for that time. There's also a way that you can set up a temporary schedule or like a rotating on-call schedule, which I'm going to go over in just a moment. So we're going to go through and say, okay, Beth is on call, so I'm going to put her in for first, second, third, and final. And then your 5th option down here is next day. So up here is immediate. That's going to be your immediate service calls. Somebody needs a phone call back right now. Maybe the panel is beeping in their face and they can't sleep. So that needs to be handled immediately. Next day service would be something that can wait until the next day. Maybe there's a light on their panel and they're not sure what it is and they just want to talk to somebody about it. That's not necessarily an immediate service call where someone needs to be woken up to contact them back. That's something that the office can handle the next day. So the next day notifications only send out one time. It's not going to go through 4 notifications like the immediate service does. So we tend to recommend putting in an email address in that next day so that, again, your on-call technician doesn't get woken up for something that can be handled by the office. So down here, you have your fire alarm messages, fire sprinkler messages, fire hood messages, fire extinguisher messages. So we've split that out. We have a lot of fire companies that have different sets of technicians for different types of things. If that is the case for you, and we do have those options available to you. Now, if you don't have a separate set of technicians for your fire service versus your burglary service, then all you really need to fill in is just going to be this burglary service messages. You want to think of this part as the default. So if everything else is blank and we get a phone call from someone stating that they need fire sprinkler, for example, since nothing is listed in there, it's going to default to whoever is listed in the burglary service schedule. Okay, so then we also have a couple different other options. We have lock, so if you do any type of locksmith services, we have a option for that. Electric messages, if you have an electric side, then we would have a place for you to put that on-call information. We also have guard messages. Guard messages are always going to be an immediate service because it's a guard. So they need to be notified immediately. So that is one option that you're not going to have next day for. And they also have video messages. So if you have a customer or a set of customers that have video monitoring, then you would use the video messages set. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about temporary schedules or rotating on-call. Now, before I go into that, I'm going to pause for just a second. Does anybody have any questions that they want to type into the chat? Okay, Moving on. So to create an on-call or a rotating on-call list, what you're going to do is click on this little plus sign over here. And that's going to say add schedule. So it's going to say that this is going to be creating a temporary schedule. You'll have a start time or a start date and time and an end date and time. Typically, if you're doing like a weekly rotation, it would start at, say, I don't know, 8 a.m. on Monday through 8 a.m. the following Monday. So what you would do for that is pick the date that it starts. So let's say we're setting up next week's schedule. So I'm going to say Monday the 27th. I'm going to change this to 8 a.m. Now you can actually type in these fields too, if that's easier for you than clicking on the drop down. I'm a typer. I would rather type things in than try to pick from a list. So you do have that option available. And then, so we have it started on the 27th. This person's going to end on August 3rd. And then I'm going to make that until 7:59 a.m. So then the next person that starts on the 3rd will start at 8 a.m. on the dot. This will copy from your permanent schedule. So that's the one that's already filled out. And the reason that we did that is just to make it easier, because typically your next day or final notice ones are going to kind of stay the same. So it'll copy from that, where then all you have to do is just go in and update who's going to be on call for that week. So it's pretty simple. You can also copy and paste these. So if I know that Beth needs to be on call for the fire messages, I can just highlight her, Control-C, type down in here, Control-V, and plug her in there too. So it can be very quick when you're going through these. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what this means. So we get this question a lot, the backup plan. What is a backup plan? What does that mean? So this little button here is what drives the notifications after that first notice. So let's say you only have somebody listed in here and you only need that one notification to go out. You don't need it to wait 10 minutes and send another one and then wait another 10 minutes and send another one. All you'll have to do is just turn this off. So if it's basically what it's saying is, if it's empty, if the field is empty, it won't send out a notification. Now with this being on, if Beth is on call for that week and she's the only person that needs to be notified, I don't actually need to put her into all 4 spots. I can just leave this and put her in the first one, and it will automatically default to whoever is listed in there. Or I can turn it off, and only one notification is going to go out. So that is what that little backup plan thing does. If you only need the one, turn it off. If you need all of them, then leave it on. Now, we also have a way where you can print out your temporary schedules and give that out to your technicians so they know who's on call and who's not on call. So this little calendar here, if you click on that, it's going to open up essentially a PDF file and show who's on call for that week or month. And then from here, you can download that and print it out and give it to your technicians. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to this field right here, copy notification list. So again, like I was talking about, let's save that. If you have a company or more than one company, you might have more than one on-call list. So what we've done is made a really simple way of taking the information from one service company and then just transferring it over to the second service company. So it allows you to just make the one change and then apply it to every other company that you have. So copy from is going to be the schedule that you want to copy. So in this case, I think we updated 207-9150. I want to copy that over to my other service company. So I'm going to click Save. And now all of the schedules were copied from one company to the other. So everybody is set. All the companies have a burglary on-call schedule for that week or month or however long I set it up for. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what happens when you get a message. So we've set our schedule up, we've set our contacts up, we know who's supposed to be notified and who's supposed to be notified on what. So when those messages come in, it's going to send the text message or the email to the person. That person is going to go ahead and click on the link that's embedded into the text message or the email, and that's going to take them to the dashboard. So we've talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about the dashboards in Compass. This is something that you can see on the mobile version of Compass as well, but that's when we're going to get into these two tabs. So you've got your service request tabs, which we've talked about previously, and we have our messages tab. So we're going to talk about each one individually. Your service request tab is going to be where all of the service request and message center notifications are housed. So if you have, if your office staff wants to go in the next day and make sure that all of the messages that were received the previous evening have been acknowledged, this would be the place to go. If you are the on-call technician and you want to acknowledge that message to make sure that the notifications stop, this would be where you would go to do that. So you have the date and time that the message was taken. You have the event ID, so this is going to tell you the type of message. So in this case, this was a fire immediate service fire sprinkler message. It's giving you the account number that it was taken on, the service company number, so you know which company that was taken, or that the message was taken on rather, the location type, the name of the account, the phone number, and then if I hover over the comment, it's going to tell me what the operator and the customer talked about. So in this particular case, this was from the Hertz Donut and Coffee Shop. Mary Dunk is requesting service on the sprinkler system. The sprinkles are not distributing evenly, and it gives the callback number. So that's all of the information that was sent over to the technician. If the technician was on their phone looking at this message, this phone number, of course, would be displayed in a way where they could click on it and contact that customer back. So over here, I want to acknowledge that to make sure that, my manager knows that I'm taking care of this. So I would go over to where it says acknowledge, and I would go ahead and click on that. And it's saying that I am about to accept this service request. So I'm taking responsibility for this particular call. And yes, I do want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click acknowledge. Now you'll notice that now it's going to show who acknowledged the message and what time the message was acknowledged. You might also notice that it looks like there are two messages. These are actually the same thing. The way that our operators log this information is they will log SRS, which is our standard sub request service event, type in the information, and then they'll send also the message center request. So if you do not want to see those SRS logs because it's after hours and you just want to look at the ones that were sent over to message center, you're just going to want to go ahead and click on this little box here where it says show SRS. We're going to uncheck that, and it's going to remove all of those sub-request service logs. So anything that is considered service is going to be in this tab. So you're going to have your next day service, your immediate service, the SRS things that the operators log, anything that is service related, your electric calls, your guard calls, all of that is going to be in one place in this tab. You can export this information if you want to. Remember, anytime you see this little piece of paper, that means that the information can be exported. So if you want to work from a spreadsheet, for example, you would be able to do that. Now, this next tab is the messages tab. So messages is going to be your standard message. And remember, those were billing, sales, general office, and data changes. So this one was a billing message on SpongeBob's account. He called in and stated that Gary ate his last bill, so he would like one to be emailed to him. So again, this is not something that you would want to send over to an on-call technician. It's more something that the office should be able to handle the next day. So we're not going to send this as an immediate message. We're going to send it as a billing message because that's who should be handling the calls. Now, once these calls are handled, and this is something that I think is a pretty good idea. So, as you're going through all of this, if you want a place to log notes or have the technician log a note about the conversation that he had with the customer, you want to go ahead and click on the account, and it's going to take you into the account so you can see the account history and, all the things. Now, that is where this comes in handy. So you can click the notes section and you can have a technician or whoever add a note in regard to the service call. So anyone can see, you know, how the technician handled it, you know, the conversation between them and the customer. And then if anything happens along, you know, later down the line, you still have that information there available to anyone. So that is pretty much it on Message Center. Before I go, does anybody have any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type my email address in the chat. If you have any questions later, feel free to email me. If you're interested in Message Center or want a little bit more information or have a one-on-one conversation with someone, please contact your business development rep, contact dealer support. We'll get you to the right people. We highly recommend this service. It's worked out really, really well, and everyone seems really happy with it.